Bug is taking us inside the story. Hi, I'm the Reading Bug. Join me for Reading Bug Adventures, unforgettable journeys with original music that'll have your toes tapping and imagination soaring. Explore an entire universe of fun with me, the Fact Fly, the Spelling Bee, and the Bookworm. Then find a quiet place to land with Lauren's little bedtime stories. Innovation, imagination, and pure fun for every child. Join the fun! Follow and listen to the Reading Bug podcast today.
I did not use any AI to make this episode.
You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Thomas Jefferson worked hard for days to write the Declaration of Independence with the help of a small group, the Committee of Five. Then the larger group, those members of Congress hanging out in the steamy hot room of Indepedence Hall, spent 2 sweaty days debating his words, tweaking them, changing them, removing words entirely, and definitely getting on Thomas Jefferson's nerves. After all of the debate, they made nearly 100 alterations. Some changes were big, some changes were small, before agreeing on it. Jefferson was unhappy. Everyone else's edits irritated him. He thought the document was pretty much perfect as it was. Was he right? He was worse than, maybe he was right, maybe he was wrong. I don't know. Editing can be a touchy subject. Anyone who's had their work critiqued and edited knows that it can be painful. And maybe the editors are right, or maybe they're worse than right. Anyway, Jefferson complained to Ben Franklin, and his friend told him a story to help him understand. There once was a man named John Thompson who opened a hat store, so he painted a sign for his new business and proudly showed it to all of his friends. It said, "John Thompson, hatter, makes and sells hats for ready money." And accompanying the words written on the sign was the image of a hat. Everyone took a good look at it and gave it some serious thought. His first friend thought the word hatter was unnecessary because the sign also said he makes and sells hats. So he removed that. The next friend thought the word makes was silly because customers would be more concerned about someone selling them a hat. So he took that off too. Another friend advised him that the words for ready money were not necessary because people would already expect this. He wasn't trading them for chicken eggs or unready money, whatever that might be, so he got rid of those words too. Now, thanks to the edits of his friends, the sign said, "John Thompson sells hats," with the image of a hat. "Sells hats?" his next friend said. "Nobody will expect you to give them away, so what's the use of the word sells? Plus, there's already a hat pictured on the sign, so what did the word hat add to anything? The picture said it all, and the word was kind of redundant." So John removed both words. And after all of the edits from his friends, his sign just said John Thompson with the image of a hat. Yeah, it was straight and to the point, and everyone understood what it meant. Benjamin Franklin's story helped Jefferson to understand that though it may be uncomfortable, perhaps sometimes we need other people's input to help us make our own point more clearly. Hello and welcome to The Past and the Curious. This is Mick Sullivan. Did I get you with the cold open? Probably should have done a live from Mick's basement on whatever day you're listening to this. It's The Past and the Curious live. Something like that. Anyway, I thought I would try something new, so you got that cold open, which is it's one of my favorite stories that has to do with Thomas Jefferson, and he recorded this in his journals. I took this, I changed it a little bit just to tighten it up and shorten it, but this was his reflection of that moment that he left in his journal. So I wanted to share that with you because the rest of this episode has to do with things surrounding the Declaration of Independence. We're going to talk about the Declaration to a degree, but we're going to talk in the first story specifically about the building where this happened and the fact that it might not have survived. Luckily it did. And the last story, the second story that you're going to hear is about Mary Katharine Goddard, which is dangerously close to another Saturday Night Live reference. Anyway, I hope you enjoy learning about her connections to the Declaration of Independence. Here we go. There is an old red brick building on Chestnut Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It has a tower and a clock and lots of big windows and an awful lot of important moments in its past. But like other historic buildings in other major cities, today this building is surrounded by a forest of concrete, glass, and steel. Taller, much more modern buildings tower above it, offices and businesses, filled with people in suits and ties and dresses, typing on computers, meeting around office tables, watching PowerPoint presentations, drinking coffee, and staying cool thanks to modern air conditioning. But when they look out the window towards the ground surrounding the old two-story building, they see hordes of tourists lined up to walk along the shaded paths, waiting to get inside and taking pictures in the front so that they can remember their visit to the birthplace of American history. Once upon a time, this building was called the Pennsylvania State House, but today we call it Indepedence Hall, and it is operated by the National Park System. If things had worked out differently, it might not be there at all today. At some point in the 1800s, the state government tried to knock the old building down to sell the land. And if things had worked out differently, there'd probably be another high-rise skyscraper where it once stood. That's wild because, in all honesty, if you had to find a building anywhere in America that could claim to be the room where it happens, well, I think this would have to be the place, because inside was, in fact, the room where it happened. So why would you want to knock that down? This building that brings so many people to downtown Philadelphia is, in fact, where the Declaration of Independence was signed. But there is far more history than that in the bones of this building. In fact, its history goes back farther than even 1776. Now, it is not the oldest building standing in America by any stretch. That honor would go to the Pueblo dwellings built by indigenous people in today's New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. And it's not even the oldest government building built in American territory by European colonists either. That would be La Casa Blanca from the 1500s in Puerto Rico, or the Palace of the Governors in New Mexico. Likewise, there are dozens of older buildings scattered around the original 13 British colonies in America. But Independence Hall is still really old. It was built in 1733. Originally, it was home to the branches of government of the colony of Pennsylvania. But when American colonists were growing upset with the King of England, this is where the delegates, representatives from each of the colonies, met to share in their outrage. The King of England had put new taxes on America. Things like sugar, tea, and paper goods were targeted by taxes, and this was upsetting. Everything from sweetening your tea to hiring a lawyer to reading a newspaper to buying a deck of playing cards was now more expensive thanks to these added fees. But there was plenty more to be angry about beyond just taxes. The Quartering Act also infuriated people. This law from the king forced Americans to feed and house British soldiers sent to the colonies in their own homes. And let me tell you something, buddy. That British soldier making a hotel out of your house wasn't going to sleep on your floor. You were. They took your bed and your best food to boot. So, hope you like leftovers. So these taxes and rules made everyone angry. But the fact that taxpayers in America had no representatives in British government, that was the pickle and cranberry icing on the salty onion cake that the king seemed to be serving them. There was no one to advocate for Americans in government, and they had no say in how the tax money was spent. Like a bitter, salty cake, it made everyone angry enough to spit. And then there was the Battle of Lexington and Concord, a battle between Americans and British soldiers in which blood was spilled. This was too much, and made plenty of people realize that something must be done. Delegates chosen from each of the 13 colonies decided to meet and made their way to Philadelphia. They knew they had to fight back not as Pennsylvania or New York or Virginia, but as a group, together. And so it was in this building, the room where it happened, in fact, in 1775, that George Washington, a man from Virginia who had actually served in the British Army, was officially given the command of the American Army. On July 4th, 1775, he issued his first order, marking the official beginning of the United States Army. Exactly 1 year later, more history was made in that room. Have you ever worked on a group project at school? Have you ever worked on a group project where one person did most of the work while the others did, let's just say, less of the work? We all know that situation from one side or another. Well, in a lot of ways, that was the case with the Declaration of Independence. A committee of 5, a team made of delegates, was given the job of writing a breakup letter from America to King George. The letter had to list out all of the things that he'd done wrong, as well as explain the American intention to declare that they were independent, no longer royal subjects to the British crown. And Thomas Jefferson was the guy who did most of the work on this breakup letter. And he wanted the language to be clear and easy to understand because everyday Americans needed to understand it too, not just the king. He had a bit of help from Ben Franklin and John Adams, along with 2 other guys named Roger and Robert that almost no one remembers. But Thomas Jefferson did most of the heavy lifting. Back in Indepedence Hall, all the delegates voted to make independence official on July 2nd, 1776. And they liked Thomas Jefferson's letter for the most part, but of course, all those people were nitpicky, and, well, words matter, so they spent 2 days debating the language of Jefferson's writing, editing it, and making Jefferson mad. Finally, John Hancock, who was presiding over the meetings, signed it on July 4th, and that made things official. Everyone else signed it later. 4 days after John Hancock put his John Hancock on the world-changing dock, the words were read outside of the storied building to the public for the first time. As you might know, it wasn't as easy as just writing a breakup letter. King George was not going to give up so easily on his valuable colonies. The war for American independence went on for years, and mostly looked bad for the Americans until 1781, when the world turned upside down and British General Cornwallis surrendered. That brought an end to the war and a new beginning to America. But a few years later, some of the biggest minds, personalities, and egos were back in Independence Hall. Turns out, to have a country, you've got to have a government, and a government takes compromise and rules and a constitution. So this work was done in the same famous Philly building. Beginning in 1787, this gathering of politicians came away with the framework for the American government, the Constitution, which outlined the presidency, the idea of senators and representatives, the Bill of Rights, all of that stuff. Pretty important things, and a pretty important room. So why would anyone try to tear down a building like this? Well, the building had gotten less important. Once upon a time, Philadelphia was the capital of Pennsylvania, but they moved it, first to Lancaster and then to Harrisburg. This meant that Independence Hall wasn't being used for government matters. Actually, painter Charles Willson Peale ran a museum on the second floor, filled with his paintings, the first assembled mastodon skeleton in America, and even that little living prairie dog sent back by Lewis and Clark to Thomas Jefferson. And I think all of these things are important. Museums are clearly awesome, but to the state government of Pennsylvania in the early 1800s, this building was just something that they owned that they could knock down and then that they could sell for money. That was more important to them because selling the land meant they could build a new state capitol building in a new city, bigger and better, but of course not one with quite as rich of a history. For clear reasons, the people of Philadelphia were upset. The room where it happened, the Liberty Bell, the historic mojo of 1776, and the iconic clock tower were all in danger of the wrecking ball. They fought and stalled and tried to raise funds for years until finally, in 1818, Indepedence Hall was saved. And it's a good thing, too. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which means it is recognized internationally for its importance and impact on humanity. And as a result, it is visited by 2 to 3 million people every year. Hey grown-ups, are you juggling the summer? Are you looking for learning that fits your family with ease? Look, I know summer schedules can look different every week for homeschool families. Between travel, camps, activities, family time, sports, IXL makes it easy to keep learning and make it a part of your routine in a very flexible, low-stress way. IXL is an award-winning online learning platform that fits seamlessly into homeschooling. It offers interactive practice across math, language arts, science, and social studies from pre-K through the 12th grade. And IXL personalizes learning for each child, keeps them engaged, and gives parents clear insights into progress. It's a simple way to support learning throughout the summer and help kids feel confident for the next school year. We've explored lots of different options in our house this summer, and it's helpful in staying sharp because, summer slide, right? But building confidence in challenging subjects is just going to help the year ahead. If it's a regular part of your learning, it's simple and time-saving. Everything is organized by grade and subjects. You can quickly find what each child needs without juggling multiple resources. And it's flexible and personalized. So whether you're reviewing earlier concepts or staying sharp in the summer, or tackling new material, IXL adapts to each child's pace with no presh. That's short for pressure. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And the Past and the Curious listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at www.ixl.com/curious. Yes, visit www.ixl.com/curious to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price.
The Past and the Curious.
Oh, I'm excited because You Have 30 Seconds this month comes from Michigan, comes from Evelyn, and has to do with one of my favorite people from the American Revolution and that time period. Take it away!
Hi, my name is Evelyn. I live in Jansen, Michigan. James Lafayette was born in 1748 in Virginia. Although enslaved, he became a spy for the American Army during the Revolutionary War. He worked with General Lafayette to gather secret British information that helped win the Battle of Yorktown. After the war, he gained his freedom in 1787, took the last name of his general, and became known as James Armistead Lafayette. He died in 1833. Remember, Secret American Hero. You're my favorite podcast. Bye.
Oh, Evelyn, what a touching message. Thank you so much. Great job. Proud of you. That was really, really great. I love James Armistead Lafayette. I should probably do an episode about him. That was great. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sending that. You did a great job. If anyone else out there is like Evelyn and has a story that they want to tell in 30 seconds, well, you have 30 seconds to do it. You know the drill. Get it recorded and email it to me at hello@thepastandthecurious.com. Thanks again, Evelyn.
It's quiz time. It's quiz time. It's quiz time. Time.
I declare it to be quiz time. In 1944, during World War II, the Declaration of Independence was taken from Washington, D.C. for safety. Where was the document hidden and kept for safekeeping? The Declaration of Independence left Washington secretly and was taken to Fort Knox, not far from me here in Louisville, Kentucky. Fort Knox is named after Henry Knox, by the way, who is featured in another popular Independence Day episode of The Past and the Curious, just from a few years back. Also featured in the past, we did an episode about the secret move to Fort Knox, because not only was it the Declaration, but it was also the Constitution, a few of Lincoln's handwritten speeches, and one of England's original copies of Magna Carta. Okay, question number 2. Amazingly, 2 former presidents died on July 4th, 1826. That is the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Who were these 2 former presidents? Oddly enough, it was the main author, Thomas Jefferson, and one of the document's largest proponents and Jefferson's collaborators, John Adams. However, their political careers eventually put them at odds, and they had a big falling out. But the 2 men became friends again in their old age, through writing letters. It was the 1800s. But it's pretty amazing that they both died on the same day, July 4th. Okay, third and final question. The 2 youngest men to sign the Declaration of Independence were both from South Carolina. How old were they? Thomas Lynch Jr. and Edward Rutledge of South Carolina were both 26 years old when they signed the document. Ben Franklin was the oldest signer. He was 70. And amazingly, Thomas Jefferson, the main author, was only 33. I don't know if you've ever seen an image of the Declaration of Independence before, but I bet you have. You can easily find one. If not, maybe a picture on a screen or in a book, or a poster in a classroom, or one of those souvenirs you get at museum gift shops that looks old but only costs a few bucks. Or maybe you've been to Washington, D.C., and you've seen the original copy in the rotunda at the National Archives. In 1776, however, most people didn't see a handwritten copy of the Declaration of Independence. They saw, or more likely, heard, a reading from a broadside, a printed copy made by a printmaker. And as such, no one at the time really knew who the 56 people were that wrote, edited, and approved this breakup letter to end all breakup letters. The first printed copies did not have any names on them besides John Hancock and Charles Thomson. John Hancock might be a familiar name, but Charles Thomson probably isn't. He was the secretary of the Continental Congress. As for the rest of them, it was dangerous to put all the names on the published copies because what they were doing was treasonous to the King of England, and that would have been punishable by death. So, for clear reasons, like staying alive, they did not include everyone else at first. But after George Washington and the American Army's success at the crossing of the Delaware at Christmas in 1776, things began to change, and a new copy of the document was published and circulated around America. Finally, everyone could see the 56 names of the signers in print and know who was behind that momentous document. But on this first printed version to include all of those names, there was a 57th name. A woman, Mary Katharine Goddard. Superstar! Work as a printer, running a print shop and publishing newspapers, booklets, and broadsides was a really important job in the colonial era. With no internet, no TV, and no radio, the main way to share information with people was through words. And the only words that you could get, other than what you could hear with your own ears, were the ones you could read with your own eyes. The printed word was crucially important in learning about current events, politics, and even having a laugh. But as important as it was, the work to make all of this was also hard and tedious. Each page of a newspaper or a pamphlet had to be typeset, meaning a printer would set each and every teeny tiny letter that would be printed onto the page, each one a tiny brass letter mounted on a wooden block, and all of those letters arranged to make up words and sentences and paragraphs were all backwards, basically like hundreds of stamps, perfectly arranged to say what the page had to say. It wasn't until everything was done and the raised letters were coated with ink and the paper was pressed to them that you could actually read the words from front to back. Printers had to set and proof and read while working with tiny backwards letters. It's enough to make someone start seeing double. This was the life led by Mary Katharine Goddard, superstar. And in a way, it was actually the family business. Her father was a physician and a postmaster in Connecticut, but after his death, Mary and her mother moved to Rhode Island to help her brother with his print and publishing business. Then the family hopped around the colonies in their work as printers, first to Philly and then to Baltimore. Eventually, Mary started running the business, and all of the papers she published after that point included the note, somewhere on the page, "Published by M.K. Goddard at the publishing office on Market Street." She put her name on there, but never really identified herself beyond the initials M.K. Most assumed she was probably a man. It would have been pretty unusual for a woman to own and operate a business like this at the time. Mary was really good at it, and other things too. She actually served as postmaster of Baltimore, the first woman postmaster in America actually, and her dedication to newspapers and the mail spoke to one of her biggest beliefs: freedom of the press. Mary Katharine Goddard believed that newspapers and journalists should be able to speak the truth, even when it made people in power upset. And the king's troops were upset about a lot, not the least of which was the rebellious group of men who were calling themselves an independent country. And it got a little hairy for those guys. In December of 1776, British troops made it into Philadelphia, which was where the Continental Congress was meeting. So if they wanted to keep their heads, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, and the rest of the gang had to get out of town. In the interest of safety, they moved their work and their meetings to Baltimore, Maryland, as it so happens, just a few blocks from Mary, who was running a stationery shop in addition to publishing one of Baltimore's 2 newspapers. And this was how she became acquainted with many of America's founding fathers. They read her newspaper, they bought blank books from her store, and most importantly, as postmaster, she was responsible for handling their mail, and that was a really important job. These men were far away from home, writing to loved ones, other politicians, and communicating with important people about important matters that could really shape the future. Mary Katharine Goddard made sure all of their mail was safe and timely. Plenty of people wanted to intercept the communications of the rebels. You might know, for the first part of the American Revolutionary War, things weren't going well for George Washington's army. He racked up loss after loss to the well-trained and well-funded British army. And though he's well remembered now, plenty of people were pretty wishy-washy about old Washington. Maybe he wasn't the man for the job. Maybe Americans were destined to lose. They were certainly good at it up until that point. But when he surprised the enemy by sneaking across the Delaware River on Christmas night and winning the Battle of Trenton, followed by another strong showing at Princeton, things started to change. John Hancock ordered a new printing of the Declaration, this time with all of the names from the men who signed, and they knew just who to ask to print the copies: Mary Katharine Goddard. This was a big job, and Mary Katharine got right to work. Now known as the Goddard broadside, her copies were the second official printing of the Declaration of Independence, and the first to include all of the names. And below the signatures of all of the delegates is another name. At the bottom you can read the words, "Printed by Mary Katharine Goddard." On nearly every other thing she published from her print shop, she called herself M.K. Goddard. But on this important document, she printed her full name, leaving no doubt that she was a woman and no doubt that she agreed with the American rebels in rejecting the king. If the revolution failed, she was in just as much danger now as the rest of them. But she believed in the cause so much that she was willing to take that risk. We don't know exactly how many copies Mary printed. Certainly a lot, But it's paper from a long time ago, so most of the copies have disappeared. From my research, it seems that we're not even sure how many copies still survive today. A Maryland government website says 11, but the National Park site says only 9, while Harvard University claims that there are 10 copies of the Goddard broadside still around. These kinds of things can be hard to be certain about, but I'm inclined to trust Harvard because they list all of the locations with their claim. And as there should be, there is definitely at least one copy of the Goddard broadside, as it's known, at the National Archives, should you ever find yourself searching for one. Like many other people of this period of American history, Mary Katharine Goddard is a fascinating person, a woman who ran an important business, defied convention, and left her mark on history, literally. So she's a person who is worthy of more discovery. If there is more to discover. That's part of the problem with someone from 250 years ago. Primary sources are the documents and information directly from a time period that we use to learn the truth about history. And in the case of people like John Adams or Jefferson or Washington, there are tons. There's letters, there's journals, all sorts of other documents. But as we look at others from the time who are more of what we would call everyday people, the available sources get fewer and farther between. We do have a legal document from the end of Mary's life. When she died at the age of 78, she freed a woman named Belinda Starling, whom she had held in slavery. In addition to freedom, Mary's will said, "And I also give and bequeath unto Belinda Starling all the property of which I did possess, all which I do to recompense the faithful performance of duties to me." It's not the perfect ending to a story, but the past is complicated. Most things are. Thank you for listening to episode 119 of The Past and the Curious. I am, and have always been, and shall always be, Mick Sullivan. Thanks for joining. I hope you enjoy the show. If you haven't explored past episodes, please go back. There's 118 other ones, in addition to all sorts of other underwear episodes, which turned into a book, you know. I see Lincoln's Underpants. If you don't have a copy of that book, you should probably find one. There's also the Animals episodes, which are happening in between these episodes for the interim until the next book is complete, which will be kickstarting at some point later on this year. So stay tuned for that. Hope you've been enjoying that. I have some people to thank, some Patreon people. Mike Heath, thank you for your support, Mr. Heath. It means a whole lot. It's really helping keep the lights on these days. And then also Jane Schmitz. Thank you, Jane. Sent you a message. If you want me to send you a song, you just let me know, okay? You can email me. And Mike, if there's someone else that I should thank in your stead, you let me know that too. I will do another shout out. I will do it for you or for any of your loved ones. Thank you very much. I hope everyone is staying cool. Hope you're enjoying summer. And I'll be talking to you soon. I'm Mick Sullivan. Bye-bye.